I've dipped slightly below the even mark when I pick up pocket threes under the gun +1 and another straddle pot. Actually, from here on out, every hand is 5, 10, 20. It's a big game. I raised to 50. The small blind is the only caller. We're heads up in position. The flop comes 10, 9, 3 with 2 spades. We've got bottom set. The opponent checks. There's a fairly coordinated board, so I could bet 50% or more of the pot. I really want to make sure I get at least some value though, and I bet $50 again in order to ensure that I can get called by an even wider range of hands. I don't like this decision as much with bottom set. It'd be better to use that sizing with top set since it's a lot less likely in that scenario that my opponent would have top pair. Small blind calls 50. Maybe I can get him to put a lot more money in on future streets. The turn is the deuce of diamonds. I love to see that. We still have the third best possible hand. The small blind checks. I want to target top pair hands, and believe it or not, the small blind could have reasonably flatted my pre-flop raise with a hand as good as pocket queen, so there's some small possibility that I'm up against an overpair. I increased my sizing to 180. This should look a bit like a bluff. I would have taken a similar line with a hand like ace-5 of diamonds or potentially even a front door flush draw. The larger bet doesn't deter the small blind from sticking around. He calls. I've got 14-35 behind, and the opponent has me slightly covered. You may be thinking, stacks are pretty large compared to how big the pot is. It's weird to bring attention to that detail, but my mind is focused on getting every chip that I can get. The river is the 5 of clubs. It's one of the best cards that the dealer could have put out there. Both flush draws miss. All of the most obvious straight draws like queen jack and 8-7 miss, and no overcards came out. If our opponent has a hand like ace-10, this is set up perfectly for us to get maximum value. Small blind checks. I'm thinking about how this hand has played out so far and how much I want to bet. If my opponent has a missed draw, he won't be able to call a bet of any amount, and he's called 2 bets so far, indicating that if he does have a hand with showdown value, it's likely pretty solid, and he'd probably be willing to call a big bet here. I bet the biggest amount that I can. That's right. We're all in for about 2.5 times the size of the pot. I'm hoping this will look like a last-ditch effort of mine to steal what's in the middle with a hand like queen jack of clubs or diamonds. A lot of the time when I've made plays like this in the past, it actually has been with complete air. You might be thinking it's stupid to do this for value since it's so unlikely that I'll be able to get called by something worse, and I'm just squandering a great opportunity to at least make some money, perhaps up to even 400 or 500. I mostly agree with that assessment, but occasionally I need to mix it up. And when I don't have any cards blocking top pair or second pair, this seems like an okay spot to swing for the fences, particularly when there were plenty of draws that have missed. This play doesn't need to work out that often in order for it to make me a lot of money. The opponent is in agony. He certainly doesn't have me beat, and almost definitely only has one pair at best. After tanking for 50 seconds, the small blind comes to a decision.
Okay, I call.
This is one of the few times we massively overbet for value and actually get called. We smash one into the bleachers to win a $3,500 pot. Not only do we get paid the maximum, but this helps balance my range for when I actually am bluffing for large amounts. I'm ecstatic to get called here. The session's going great. We're up around 1,700 with plenty of poker left to be played. We get some new chips and pocket threes under the gun about 15 minutes later. It's certainly okay to fold small pocket pairs from early position if you're in a tough game with lots of 3-betting. Most of the time, that won't be the case. I raised to 30. The big blind is my good friend Kevin Colenso. He's been in several previous vlogs. He calls for 20 more. We're heads up in position. The flop comes 7-4-3 rainbow. We've got bottom set in a situation where we shouldn't be strong very often. The big blind checks. I'm not a big fan of slow playing, particularly when the board is coordinated. I bet 40. The big blind may have a piece. He calls. The turn is the 6 of spades, putting 4 to the straight out there. Kevin could easily have a 5. He knows it. He knows that I know it. He reps it and leads for 80. Sets haven't been good to us so far. With less than 20 minutes into the session, we lost half our stack by losing to a straight when we had a set earlier, and we may lose to another straight here. Again, we can't fold, especially for the price we're getting, when we should have at least full house outs. We call, then wish very hard for the board to pair. The dealer might be a genie. He puts out another 6. We improve to a full house in a spot where it looks like we might just have an overpair to the board. Our good buddy is never going to suspect we've got a monster. He bets a healthy 240. The issue is that he actually could have a full house himself, and every other full house is beating us. He could have comfortably led turn with a higher set, or even 2 pair that is now turned into a better full house, knowing that I'll have very few 5s as an early position pre-flop raiser. I'll really only have pocket 5 sometimes, and ace-5 suited. That's it. If I raise over a fairly large bet, my opponent is too good to call me with a hand even as good as a straight. He didn't win his 2 World Series of Poker circuit rings and $1.5 million in tournament cashes by calling a bunch of river raises. Since I don't think that we'll get called by worse, I just flat. It turns out, Kevin isn't my friend at all. He tried to bluff me with ace-queen suited while I was already stuck. What a complete lack of respect. He knows the board is theoretically better for his range than it should be for ours. In fact, based on how this hand played, it would seem that our whole cards got somehow switched. I wouldn't expect Kevin to have ace-queen, and he obviously didn't expect me to have threes full. We're already on the comeback trail. It's nice to win this one to alleviate some of my concerns that we're going to get absolutely torched today. At the next table, we pick up pocket threes in the hijack. The player in middle position raises to 20. I call, the cutoff calls, the button calls. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes 7-6-3 with 2 spades. We've got bottom set on a very coordinated board against multiple opponents. It's about to go down. The middle position player checks. We can't let this check back. I bet 65. The cutoff folds immediately. The button could have a strong draw, a straight, a better set, 2 pair, or an overpair. He raises to 250. The middle position player folds. I've got bottom set, and that's a phenomenal hand, but the 4th nuts doesn't feel super strong in a multi-way pot when the button could have easily called pre-flop with pocket 7s, 6s, or 5-4 suited. If I re-raise, I'll mostly just get called my hands that are beating me, or I'll have lots of outs like ace-5 of spades. Still, I'm not getting away from this, and I need to deny equity in instances when I'm ahead. I re-raise to 600. If I get set over set, that's just a cooler. The opponent's in the tank for a long time. I'm not sure if he's Hollywooding or not. Then, if we listen closely, we hear him say, the button has 1400 total. After he says that, I don't think that he's acting. I think he has a genuine decision to make about what to do. Eventually, he seals his fate and jams. I didn't re-raise to 600 with intentions of folding.
You're on? Run it twice? I don't know if they allow you to. It's up to you. I would, yeah. You want to run it twice? Can you run it twice here?
Straight drop flush draw versus the set.
The opponent has 5 deuce of spades for a big combo draw versus my set. It's one of the best case scenarios, and we're still only a 2-1 favorite. We get permission to run it twice. The last time I ran it twice, it was for a pot over $60,000, and I lost both runouts. This one's for less than $3,000, but right now, I want to win it just as bad. It'll be tough to scoop though. The first turn is the 6 of clubs, locking up half the pot for us since we improved to a full house. I'm immediately regretting running it twice. The river is an inconsequential 8 of clubs. I was hoping it was a spade or 4 so that the opponent would burn some of his outs before going into the second run out. The dealer puts out the king of hearts on the second turn. It's a nice safe card. We're 1 blank away from winning the entire pot outright. The last river is the jack of clubs. We win it all and are off to an amazing start. It's about an hour and a half into the session and we're up $2,000. That's 400 big blinds. Apparently, while I was in Austin, I was saving up all my run good for this LA meetup game. I can't help but think that if I was up 400 big blinds in the previous session, I would have had an $80,000 profit. 2,000 is still pretty good for an hour and a half of playing. I'll take it. We're going to try and expand on it though. I'm actually quite happy now, but that's only because I've got pocket threes and I'm ready to triple barrel bluff someone. I raised to 30 from the hijack. The small blind just got back from a break and bought the button. He calls for 20 more. We're heads up in position. The flop comes ace queen 5 rainbow. My opponent has been 3-betting a lot pre-flop. Since he didn't in this hand, he won't have aces or queens and probably won't have ace queen or maybe even ace 5 suited since that frequently gets selected for the 3-bet bin. He checks. I can have all kinds of strong hands on this board. I bet 20 to possibly clear out some hands better than mine, like any small to medium pocket pairs. The opponent somewhat surprisingly calls. The turn is the king of diamonds. It's another card that's better from my range. I can still have pocket kings, ace king and jack 10, although the small blind can have jack 10 as well. He checks. An underpair to a board that favors me as the pre-flop aggressor seems like a good candidate to continue bluffing with. I'm probably dead to 2 outs though. I bet 50 to maybe get a fold out of a queen. I haven't bet large amounts. It should look like I'm trying to get value. Evidently, I didn't make it enough. The small blind calls. The river is the 7 of hearts. We've got 6th pair, which is an interesting situation. Poker books don't tend to dedicate many chapters to 6th pair scenarios, especially after there's been betting on the flop and the turn. I'm kind of just winging it here. The small blind checks. He didn't check raise the turn like a lot of players would with a straight. He's almost never going to have sets of aces, kings, or queens. He's never going to have ace king. He most likely has an ace and a bad kicker. If we check back, we'll almost certainly lose. There has to be an amount that'll get an ace to fold. The opponent is a good player. He knows that I have the range advantage. What amount would I make it with a set or a straight? 140 seems like a solid number. It's quite a bit more than I made it on the turn, but it's still only 70% of the pot. The small blind is visibly frustrated. He folds, allowing us to get another bluff through. This has been a scrappy session. We're now down to playing 5-handed. There's no straddle on, and Alex limps in from the cutoff with ace-10 offsuit. We've got pocket threes in the small blind. There's no real need to raise. I'm okay seeing a flop for a discount. I call for 100 more. Ivy checks his option. We're going 3 ways to the flop out of position. The dealer puts out 9-4-3 with 2 diamonds. We have bottom set in a pot where Ivy has top pair, but is drawing nearly dead. Sometimes I'll lead with weaker hands like gut shot straight draws on low boards and limped pots when I'm in small blind. Here, I've got the second best hand that I'll ever have. For balance, I make almost a pot-sized bet of 500. Ivy can't go anywhere with a 9 in his hand. He's in trouble but makes the call. Botez thinks that I might have some type of draw or that she'll at least have some turns that'll help her improve. She calls with ace high. It seems likely to me that one or both players has a drawing hand, especially since there aren't many threes left in the deck. The turn is the 10 of spades. It's a great card in my mind and in Botez's, but it's actually a nightmare for Botez. There are even more straight draw possibilities now. I increase the sizing to more than a pot-sized bet of 2,500. Since this was a limped pot, it's not too large of a bet in relation to the game that we're playing. Both opponents are drawing completely dead. Ivy calls with the second best pair. Even with Botez behind him, he must have put her on some type of draw. To his credit, she had nothing on the flop, and there's no real way for him to know that she'd connect with a 10. Alex calls as well. I'm rooting very hard for the board to pair or for a blank. If the river is non-diamond, ace, 10, or 9, I can possibly make a lot more money. Instead, the river is the jack of diamonds. Everyone has a hand with value and is drastically downgraded as the flush draw gets there, as well as several straights. I check with intentions to call a bet. Phil checks, Alex checks back. I turn over the set, figuring it's gotta be good when it checks through like that. It is. We win another pot. Our stack climbs to over 60,000. We're up more than 20,000 in a 5-handed game with Ivy on our left. The straddle's no longer on at the moment. I pick up pocket threes under the gun. I'll mix in raising or folding this hand from early position depending on how much revenge I need to get. After getting bluffed, I certainly need to get some, so I put in the raise to 60. The guy who lost with pocket aces against my 5-4 offsuit might be wanting revenge against me. He 3-bets at 260 from the cutoff. This is a large amount, as if he wants to get a fold out of me. Often, when recreational players make large raises pre-flop, it's with hands that they know are good but are uncomfortable playing. I see this play done the most with ace-king, pocket queens, and jiggities. Folding seems reasonable. The cutoff is a player I'd like to get involved the most with though, so I go a little out of my way in order to do that. I call for 200 more. It's heads up and we're out of position. The flop comes 10-4-4. We don't flop a set. At least we're still beating ace-king, which is the most likely hand that he'll have in my mind. I check. The dude in the cutoff sticks with the story that he's got something good. He bets 400. I'm not buying it. When he actually had aces earlier, he tried to get really tricky with them by limping in pre-flop, not showing any aggression until the river. Now he's pretending to have a big hand and is being really aggressive. It doesn't quite fit his MO. I call one time to see how he'll play the turn. If we don't improve and he bets again, I'll fold. The dealer puts out the queen of spades. It's not particularly great because there's still some chance that I could be up against ace-queen or pocket queens. I check. Luckily the player checks back and he genuinely doesn't look happy about the queen. I still think that the most likely hand that he has is ace-king, followed by pocket jiggities. The river is the queen of clubs. My hand is counterfeited. I'm playing the board in what's become a rather large pot. The bad news is that I've got nothing. The good news is that the opponent showed weakness on the turn by checking back. He seemed afraid that I might have connected, and rightfully so. I'll have hands like ace-queen, pocket queens, pocket 10s, pocket 4s, maybe even ace-4 suited, queen 10 suited, and a few other combos containing a queen, and now some flushes. In reality, I've got the worst hand that I'll ever have, but found a window that just might bail me out. The only way that I can win this is if I bluff. I slide in and overbet at 2,000. If he doesn't have quads or a boat, he's not going to like it, and it shouldn't take much time to find out if he's that strong. We don't get snap called, and I don't get the sense that he's considering raising either. If he calls with ace high, then he just deserves to win. I'm sitting here sweating while I wait for my opponent to make his decision. I'm staring straight at the board without trying to move too much. 45 seconds go by before the opponent mucks his cards. We get a huge bluff through and can finally breathe again. We made a high variance play that I'm glad works out. Some people are away from the table. It's 6-handed when we're dealt pocket threes under the gun. I raised to 60. The button calls. He's a rec player who doesn't like to fold at all. I recently saw him call a pre-flop raised and then multiple streets, including a large river bet with queen 5 suited. He won the pot, but he only had a pair of queens and a bad kicker. We're heads up out of position. The flop is ace-9-3 rainbow. We drill a set with the best opponent at the table to do so against. If he has an ace, I should be able to extract a lot of money from his hand. For that reason, I'm not slow playing. I bet 60. With zero hesitation, the button calls. We appear to have him hooked. He doesn't look like he's going to be folding. The turn is the 7 of spades. There were no reasonable draws on the board, so I expect to be up against hands that can call large amounts going forward. I bump it up and bet 180. Again, very little time goes by before the opponent gets his calling chips in the middle. My plan is to bet big on the river. The dealer puts out the deuce of hearts. The opponent's light calls with queen 5 in a previous hand are still in the back of my mind. That, coupled with this being an ace-high board and people especially not liking to fold pairs of aces, sets this up perfectly for me to go for the home run. I overbet pot, making it 700. Maybe the button will have 2 pair and can call easily. Maybe he'll think that I'm just trying to bluff him out of the pot and will try to keep me honest. This isn't an easy decision for him. He's in the tank. Perhaps I got too greedy. He lays it down. I probably could have made a few hundred more had I bet less. In this one, we've got pocket 3s under the gun. I raised to 15. The button calls. The small blind calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes king, king 3 with 2 spades. I immediately hang up the phone with the sales representative from Bass Pro Shops after telling him, thanks, but I've already got a boat. The small blind checks. I put in a sneaky check. The button also checks. The turn is the 8 of clubs. This excites the small blind. He bets 15. It's time for us to make our move. I raise it to 50. That's too much for the button. He folds. The small blind isn't deterred. He calls for 35 more. Maybe he's got trips. The river is another 3. We make quad 3s for the second time today. I've never made quads twice in the same session before. It's pretty amazing. The small blind checks. He only has 380 left in his stack. If he has a king, he's never folding to a jam. If he has a missed flush draw, he can't call a bet anyway. I rip it in. The small blind apparently has air and folds immediately.
Did river quads there.
There it is.